Shabbat Shalom. Why do we lose our way in life? Why do so many of us who have so much potential screw up our lives? What causes us to deviate from the right path and to take the wrong way? Why do athletes who are at the pinnacle of the mountain and who are so lucratively rewarded cheat? Why do financial geniuses who have more than they could ever spend use their enormous brain power to steal rather than to stay true? Why do we betray those whom we most love? How many of us know people who are truly brilliant, who were by far the smartest in the class, but were the dumbest in life? There are people who attended the best colleges in the world and who did the worst deeds. On last summer's Synagogue mission to Europe, we visited the site of the Wannsee Conference outside Berlin. Half the participants of the Wannsee Conference that planned the final solution were PhDs, or carried the title doctor. Why? Why so much potential and so many instances of squandered potential? This week's Torah portion raises these questions, and for 3,000 years, Jewish tradition has tried to find the answers. Moses goes up the mountain to receive the law. He spends 40 days and 40 nights absorbing what would become the constitution of the Jewish people, the 10 Commandments and all the additional rules and regulations. God has been kind to this generation of the Hebrews. The shackles of slavery were broken, Pharaoh was destroyed, and God placed these former slaves at the very cusp of the promised land, a land flowing with milk and honey, filled with the bounty of life. And not only that, these slaves, who a year before had nothing, were now wealthy. The Bible tells us that Egypt had been dispossessed of its gold and silver, compensation, according to the rabbis, affirmative action for the Israelites, for 400 years of bondage. We know that the Jews had a lot of gold. In the past 2 weeks, we've read in the Torah portions how the desert tabernacle was to be built with an abundance of gold and silver and precious gems. So now, at the holy mountain, brought here by a loving God who plucked the slaves as on wings of eagles from the land of darkness to God's holy mountain, now they commit the greatest apostasy of all with the very gold that God intended to glorify the tabernacle, and they built a golden calf and they milked it for everything it had in utter disregard of everything that had just transpired. They prostrate themselves before this unmovable object. It's completely bull. It's laughable. Really. But they do it nonetheless. And the stakes are high. Why? At the moment of this most intimate consummation of the love affair between God and God's people, in the colorful language of rabbinic sages, as the bride, the Jewish people is under the chuppah. Why now, at this very moment, does the bride cheat and run off with this effervescent bovine backstabber? Talmudic sages come up with a remarkable answer. They said in the school of Rabbi Yanai, Moses said to the Holy One, blessed be he, sovereign of the universe, the silver and the gold that you showered on Israel, that is what led to the idol. In other words, Moses tried to defend the Jewish people whom God had threatened to destroy with a withering cross accusation. Why do you blame them? Say Moses. It's your fault, God. You were the one that gave them the gold in the first place. It's stunning, really. You see how Judaism has no hesitation to portray its greatest heroes arguing with God. In fact, it's what makes them great, that they see injustice and they argue with the Creator. And the sages continue, it's like the case of a lean and obedient cow whose owner suddenly gave it the choicest food to eat, and the cow then began to kick the owner. It's like the case of a man who had a son, say the rabbis. He bathed him and anointed him and gave him plenty to eat and drink, and hung a purse around his neck and set him down at the door of a bawdy bar. How could the boy not sin? Asked the sages. Rabbi Acha said this illustrates the popular saying, a full stomach is bad for you. In other words, one answer that the tradition gave to the problem of apostasy and idolatry, straying from the right path, which leads forward for you into your promised land, one reason that we so often take the wrong path to go backwards to Egypt and to slavery, is satiation. We have too much. Too much leads to idolatry. Too much leads to degeneracy. Like the lean cow who previously had to work all day to eat a few scraps of grass that is suddenly filled with the most satiating and the most fatty foods. People, too, become satiated and accustomed to satiation and then demand it. Now, understand what the rabbis are saying. It's not the money. It's not the gold. It's not the wealth that is the problem. After all, the very same gold that's used to build the golden calf was used to build the tabernacle. God's home in the wilderness, the most sacred spot on earth. It's not the gold. As we have spoken many times, Jews are not conflicted about money. We are commanded to take pleasure in the world and to delight in the beneficence of God's universe. The rabbis caution that we will all be called to account for all of the legitimate pleasures that we have denied ourselves in this life. People should work hard and earn a good living. Moreover, our tradition emphasizes that there are many social problems that can only be solved through affluence, through the accumulation of considerable financial resources. Jews are not attracted to poverty. We do not take oaths of poverty. There is nothing inherently noble in poverty. A poor person is not necessarily honorable, and an honorable person is not necessarily poor. For the most part, Judaism considered poverty to be pointless suffering. Jews do not aspire to deprivation, nor do we feel guilty about financial success. Quite the contrary. We admire people who have become prosperous as a result of their own honest efforts. It wasn't the gold that was the problem, say the rabbis. It was the satiation that was the problem, that was symbolized and exacerbated by the gold. Everything was taken care of for the Israelites: food, water, navigation, clothing, a cushy job lighting the eternal flame in the tabernacle. You know, that only has to be lit once. And the rest, you sit and you watch and you make sure it never goes out. A penthouse tent near the shopping mall, a cool Cadillac Camel. People must have drive, ambition, the need to succeed, and these, according to the sages, were suppressed by God. And that is what led to the apostasy. They didn't have to work for anything. They had no challenges, no hardships, no goals, no frustrations, and they became satisfied, satiated, and lazy. It's one of the problems of our times. It's true that many people in this country are suffering. They are worried and concerned. It's hard for them to make ends meet, and one can only recoil in disgust when we look at our leaders who seem to care only for themselves, rather than adopting the Moses model of leadership in risking all for the sake of the people. But at the same time, so many people in America have never had it so good and have never been so miserable. So many people in America have never been so educated and have never been so ignorant of what is really important. So many people in America have never prospered so much from the bounty left to us by past generations, but have never been so miserly in sharing that bounty with others. It's because we've become technicians. We specialize in our own narrow lives. We hardly think of the deeper gifts of life. We give scant thought to the central purposes of life. We're narrow, we're mechanical. And this, according to Jewish wisdom, is a form of idolatry. We worship the wrong things. We are obsessed with celebrity and apathetic to suffering. One of the distinctive risks of our day is that so many people seem no longer to believe in anything. And it's the absence of some belief, some big idea, central values to believe in, that people lose their way. They waste their lives. We need ideas. We need principles to commit to. We need challenges in our lives, intellectual challenges, professional challenges, personal challenges, and communal challenges. We need failures and disappointments in our lives. We need struggle. To check out, to be satiated, is a form of idolatry, according to the Jewish sages. Happiness is in the journey. It's in the struggle. It's in the daily challenges. Happiness is in the pursuit. If we ever actually found happiness, we'd be miserable. After the events at Mount Sinai, God becomes increasingly less active and increasingly less involved in the life of the people. Soon, God will determine that the Israelites need to spend 40 years in the wilderness so that they can learn to fend for themselves, to get their own food, to fight their own way, to fight their own battles. It's almost an acknowledgement of Moses' central argument against God, as we read in our Torah portion. Why, God, are you angry with your people? This idolatry, this worship of false values and ideas was brought about because you satiated the people. Shuv micharon apecha v'yinachem al ha'ra'ah le'amecha. Turn from your anger and renounce your plan to destroy your people. What they need is purpose, challenge, hardships, trials, freedom to try and to fail and to make mistakes. Vayinachem Adonai al ha'ra'ah asher diber la'asot le'amo. And the Eternal renounced the punishment that was planned for God's people. Amen.